You see that BDS 2014 GMC Sierra. We started 6 years ago when ESC started being implemented. And ESC is electronic stability control. Every vehicle under 10,000 pounds in the U.S. has ESC on board. Well, when you modify a vehicle, you put a 6-inch lift kit like that, bigger wheels and tires, you have to make sure that the ESC, lane departure warning, all the other systems are still compliant. You cannot knowingly take the vehicle out of compliance. Or, just as Paul said, it will happen. Something, you know, and again, you're betting your company if you don't have the due diligence and demonstrate. In this case, we have the testing through Link Engineering, the analysis through CUI Car and Altair, and our companies. With that, it says the vehicle is still in compliance, and we actually bring that back into the OEMs to demonstrate that, and their engineers first say, this is exactly how we would have done it. So that's a great example of the aftermarket and the OEMs collaborating to get that. This is the fun time, because now it's your chance to ask questions. And I think the MSD folks that are here, Russell and others, I think it's a great opportunity to say, what's this mean to the aftermarket? You know, we got the entertainment systems that Jake started off with, and Ted with Pioneer. And you look at the diversity of this group, you say, how does this connect with that? How does this connect with that? It could come in through the infotainment system, the warning and the connectivity of the vehicles. I mean, you had a great slide. What's next? What is next? How is it the integration of what's already there? What do you guys think? I mean, where are we in terms of implementation of getting the vehicles connected, but with the cool factor of the infotainment systems? I mean, what's going to drive that? NVIDIA is obviously at the center of some of the hardware and software. David?
Yeah, so maybe I can comment a little bit about where we actually see this in place today. So I showed you the picture of the Tesla Model S system. One of the things that people actually find interesting about that vehicle is that fundamentally as a vehicle, it's the one vehicle that will actually get better with time. And the reason why that is because that platform, that infotainment platform, is connected by a 3G data connection that essentially is dynamically receiving updates just the same way that your smartphone or your tablet is receiving updates. And sometimes that's without your notice. For example, Tesla had an early implementation of the vehicle where essentially if you took your foot off the brake, as you would, you know, to put the car into drive, the car would not roll forward. Because again, it's an electric vehicle, so it needs the accelerator to actually move. Now, in a regular, you know, internal combustion type of vehicle, you take your foot off the brake, the car creeps forward. So Tesla actually implemented an over-the-air update functionality to enable that creep function to actually occur in the vehicle.
Pretty cool.
So this is a way, again, that this connected vehicle implementation allows the vehicle to actually grow with the future. So it's something that we already see today.
So when you put an app in a vehicle, Ted, you got to make sure that it's still all playing well together, right?
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, the answer would be, this is as you said, it's a really unique time, and it's a great time for opportunities.
Absolutely fun.
When we look back historically, I've got, you know, from other presentations, I've got a picture of an old radio that had 5 push buttons for tuner presets. And what is really unique today, whether it's the Tesla or David's NVIDIA platform and module, or the things that Jake is doing, or even the things that Pioneer are doing, is now we have the ability to run an app, whether it's embedded or on a connected device, and through the use of a touchscreen, change what those buttons do from time to time. You know, we did a quick snapshot back 20 years. You know, we've got electric vehicles here. The GM EV1 back, what was that, 1996?
Oh, yeah.
I've got a great picture of the dash of that, and it had a conventional radio in it, which is what I was interested in. But it had probably 100 buttons on the center console.
Whoa.
And the Tesla now, as David said, it's configurable screens.
Yep.
So depending on what mode you're using, what you're doing, whether you're adjusting the air conditioner or the audio controls or the safety function of the vehicle, the car knows what screen to display. And I think the opportunity is there, whether it's a vehicle-to-vehicle communication module or you know, a home link that turns on your lights when you pull into the garage or does other things. You know, it's a great time because we've got a lot of, as I said before, you know, this entire show is filled with people who have great ideas, and now it's just a matter of getting us all to, as you said, collaborate and communicate.
Yeah, and that's what this theater here is for. It's to bring the ideas together and put them in front of you. We want you to be on the show floor buying and selling. Obviously, it's a B2B show, but we want to give you the insights of what's coming next. So I mean, Pioneer is a great example. Any other comments?
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing even with HomeLink. I mean, the traditional mechanical switches in a Tesla, it's a capacitive touch on the display. Displays are expensive, and OEs are going, what else can I do with this thing? But you got to be considerate about safety and when do you need to have access to what. And some of the things that we've talked about, it's actually in place at Audi on the MMI, and Toyota does it on a embedded display in a mirror, is starting to provide training instructions and textual information to the driver when appropriate, like if you're training a device to it, or it's activated. Another thing we're looking at is GPS based. So instead of having a limitation of how many switches do I have, maybe if I train a device to a certain application, what's the GPS coordinate I'm at? So it's my garage door opener. So the buttons are gone. Once the vehicle recognizes a GPS coordinate, they pop up on the touch screen and you activate the device.
Any comments, Jake? I mean, you're at the forefront of what basically Gen Y, Gen O wants in a car.
Aging myself a little bit.
No, you're not wearing a suit and you don't have a tie. I see.
I think that the bigger question is about how everything's going to be working together. And I know that you're going to hear that on any panel. Oh, together, future innovation, strategize, right? I think when you really get down to it, it's, TVs work with Blu-ray players because of HDMI as a standard. And when you start having multiple cars talking to each other and you have multiple devices, garage door openers, phones, tablets, rear seat entertainment, OBD2 connectors, GoPro. If you want to have everything talk with each other, you have to have standardization. And there's not been any solid standardization in our industry. So I feel that is really what has to happen to get all these different things talking with each other.
Yep.
When you do that, it's going to solve a lot of the issues that regulatory, safety, and most important, or maybe not most importantly, but as important, my mom being able to figure out how to work this stuff.
Yeah, and you do bridge a generation. And a lot of times, if you've heard Jake speak before, refers back to his mom because he's connecting the generations, and that's really what it is. I mean, Gen Y, Gen O, the optimizers do buy quite a few vehicles, but the boomers and beyond that are buying more. So connecting the generations and keeping people. I must have seen it 10 times here in the hotel that I've been here. It's I think it's a Twitter. My grandmother's been on Twitter, some young girl talking about that over and over since like 2006 or something.
So John, one thing that I don't think you know about me is when I first started the business, we designed consumer products for baby boomers. It was like our little space that we started off with. You know what I haven't seen here? I don't know if it exists, but is anybody making technology that's going to help my parents drive further into their life?
Right.
I haven't seen a lot around.
Well, that's where connectivity is really going to come in. When Anthony Lewandowski from Google had the Google car here last year, they introduced their test driver, Steve, 65 years old and legally blind. Great test driver. I thought that was great.
So maybe just one thing. So we're trying to address sort of that extension of drivability, if you will, by really commonizing that computer platform that's within the vehicle. Or commonizing is maybe not the right word. Maybe sort of democratizing what's available in the vehicle. If we standardize it and we create a way again to grow it through iterative development in the future, that's what allows a lot of these emerging technologies, developing technologies that are even coming from other parts of different industries to be part of the vehicle. And I hope that really gives us a development path for the future to sort of scale.
That's good. Greg, you went and saw the folks from MSD and Brainwave I was talking about. To me, I want to use that as kind of an example of the ideas coming together. We had a panel yesterday, and one guy made a great comment. It actually came from the question. And the answer was, well, SEMA is a bunch of old white guys. And I think we really do need to address that. Where is the next generation coming from? This is the session that really does push that edge. We talked about branding and some of the other technologies, but the connected vehicle, as I said earlier, the next 20 years is going to change 10 times more than it has in the last 100 years because of the technologies. So Greg, what did you see at Brainwave that integrates with what we're talking about here? Is that a step where we're going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that work, and Jake hit on it. It's the standards and integration. And it's how do you get the safety applications to integrate with the telematics and other applications in the vehicle, the entertainment applications, so that when I'm in a sudden braking maneuver, something happens with my radio, or I can't play with my radio because I'm braking and I'm focused.
Right.
And I think you see some technologies out there within the ability to pull that data out of the vehicle so that I can share that data. And that's where what I saw with Brainwave of starting to be able to get that data and standardize that data within the vehicle, whether it's coming from a braking system or an acceleration system or an analog brake control system or stability control system. The more of that is standard within the vehicle that I can pull off, the more of it that central processing unit or the GPU could take and use that data to be able to make the driving experience safer and share that with those in the immediate vicinity of me so they know what my car is doing and I know what their car is doing. So the more data you can pull off of those different components of a vehicle and get within a central system within your car and share with those cars around you, the more applications you have to be able to make the driving experience safer, which then gets to the question of being able to extend the life of drivers that are out there because they don't have to be quite as much in control. The car can take over certain basic functions.
And giving the driver the choice. You saw in the Audi driver assist, right? Activate, deactivate.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of these things where autonomous driving and sort of the idea of even semi-autonomous driving is a feature that I think all of us are going to want to have the ability to enable or not. I mean, because, you know, I don't know. I mean, I really like driving at certain points. I mean, there's an enjoyment factor that you get out of actually operating your car. I don't think we ever want to completely take away that ability. But we do want the ability that, you know, as we're involved in more of the mundane sort of commuting things, that we have the ability, we have choice. Mm-hmm. You know, we want this option enabled. Just like the same way that we have choice for the styling and the look and feel of what's in our vehicle or what the outside of our vehicle looks like.
I'll add one other thing to that. I have a 2-year-old, and 14-year-old, I want to be able to control which mode he drives.
Yeah. Well, and you heard Neil Young talk about he doesn't have grandkids, but he says 20 years from now he wants his grandkids to have a better planet. And that's why he's doing what he's doing. Paul, are we on the right track in terms of the policies and things coming, or are we going to be like, oh shit, we're going on that road?
No, you know, you have to keep one thing in mind. There isn't a federal safety standard in place that didn't derive from technology that was already in use and on the roads. You know, we don't have, by design, safety standards are not supposed to drive technology. So the way the system is set up, I mean, even we talked about electronic stability control, which is a major positive development.
Yeah.
By the time NHTSA promulgated that rule, launched the rulemaking in 2006, more than, I think, 30% of the vehicles on the road, new vehicles, already had ESC.
Right.
Mm-hmm. By the time NHTSA issued the final rule, I think 4 years later,
yep,
almost 90% of the vehicles on the road had ESC. So these technologies, lane change avoidance, forward collision, imminent crash, as I said, there's no safety standards on those. I suspect over time there will be.
Right.
But by the time those go into place, all those technologies are going to be commonplace.
That's great. I mean, and to me, that's good, because at times you again, back to the millennials, to many of them, driving is the distraction. They do want to tweet. They do want to text while they're driving. Let's do it in a safe way. If they glance or take their eyes off the road for more than 2.5 seconds, maybe the car does take over seamlessly in and out. Could help a lot. Any questions from the audience?
Is it working?
Yes.
Hi, I'm an old white guy. I'm a member of SEMA, and I don't have a suit or a tie. I'm also Ron Turcott, CEO of MSD Performance, and I'd like to invite the panel back to our booth after this session, if you have
That's
time,
great.
to have some discussions on Brainwave, where it is, where it's going, and what our vision is. And that addresses interactivity, safety, and all the other compliance issues that would be involved.
Absolutely. And I'll take that as a challenge, too, to this entire group. If next year, if you can work on something and bring it to the forefront, have it up here next year to say it came out of the integration here. So thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. Next, please.
My question has, Greg, correct?
Yeah.
So I appreciate the panel. Everything's great, but you're the only person I heard use the word hack. Mm-hmm. and I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but we're in a cyber world, and you just read the news. So I'm happy about all this stuff. It's great, but unless you're going to address cyber security and the hacking issues, all this is irrelevant.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just read the news every minute, every feed. Everything's being hacked. Everything. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that can't be hacked. I was at DEF CON and Black Hat for 2 weeks. So every automotive technology ripped apart, re-engineered, reverse logistics in a matter of hours. So you got to address that issue. You got to tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about. It's all great to hear about all the great stuff, but as I said, he mentioned hack, and I think it's important that that be addressed because it's a reality. It's not an unreality. It's a fact of life. So how are you going to address the security issues that fall in line with everything that is happening on every area to hack into every single thing technologically into every vehicle of every component that's already on the vehicle?
Yep. And that's a good point. SEMA members have been hacking into vehicles for 30 years. And thanks to people like Facebook and et cetera, they made hackathons and Pioneer, made hacking cool. I mean, and paying people to hack into vehicles. But you're absolutely right, the security aspects. Let's jump in.
Yeah, so from our perspective, is at Livio, we've seen that nothing's really hack-proof, okay? Nothing's totally future-proof, period. You know, there's always the asterisks. What we've done as a best practice is we've pulled away the connections between vehicle-specific systems that involve safety from entertainment. And we put up, you know, industry standard firewalls, which are obviously hackable. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for the driver and put your best effort forward to prevent it. And as been mentioned a few times, being able to do those updates and patching any vulnerabilities that you have in the vehicle. One example is that we did a project for a vehicle where the alert chimes for any vehicle, like a hazard, you know, something wrong happened in the vehicle, and the speakers would be like, you know, tell you, hey, there's something wrong, ding, you know, pull over, your engine's overheating, whatever it may be. Those sounds were stored inside of the radio, the head unit. So there's an issue where if we have code that resides on that physical head unit, and that head unit has safety and security systems built in, then there's an inherent exposure from having a system where that's touching. And what we've seen with this particular project is those specific sounds were pulled out on a separate module, which, again, anything can be tampered with or changed. But because it's outside of that box, it's a separate system. So that's, from a practical standpoint, you're right. There's nothing that you can do to be totally safe. But you have to do the best job you possibly can and change the system in such a way which deters, makes it more difficult, and you can replace those vulnerabilities as quick as possible.
Yeah,
please, jump in.
Yeah, so I think the other piece, like I showed you in some of the slides there, I was able to physically hack, you know, my own production 2013 Ford Explorer. That was a physical hack. I mean, I literally had to, you know, clip on to the physical vehicle interface to actually debug, you know, what was traveling down the communication network in the vehicle. As Jake's saying, physical separation is probably the only thing that really prevents a lot of that. From a software standpoint, the other thing that I can recommend is kind of to that ubiquity of software development that we're talking about for the vehicle, right? So fundamentally opening, you know, the platform up to be updated by all these developers that are in the field developing commonplace applications such that the vehicle is always evolving. The reason why a lot of hacks occur from a software development standpoint is because they're stagnant, they're stationary. And so people are able to study and then you know, figure out ways to exploit, you know, the feature that's a permanent feature of that system in the vehicle today. If the vehicle system is always dynamic, then it's harder and harder to do that. And it's sort of like a rolling code, if you will, and a rolling target that you have to hit.
Yeah, and
so I think that's another way to kind of add some level of security to it.
Actually, Gentex, that's one thing I remember from my JCI is rolling codes.
I mean, it's human nature. If you tell people they can't do it, they'll figure out a way to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
The one thing I'd point out, to, and Greg can talk at length about this, but that question you raised about security is a major focus of what NHTSA is looking at. And it's complicated, and it's very complicated because you have the technical aspects, but one of the things, you're going to have to set up a certification authority to make sure that any devices that are allowed into connected vehicles meet a certain technical criteria. So there's going to have to be a certification authority. There's going to have to be some organization that oversees the certification authority, which may not be the government. I mean, NHTSA may want this to be done by a private sector organization, which raises some difficult legal and policy issues. But it's a very major focus of what they're looking at, because it's you know, that's obviously the one difference between the connected vehicle and the automated vehicle, where the automated vehicle is just based on in-vehicle sensors is the connectivity part, which is unprecedented in the motor vehicle area. And it does raise all the issues you're raising, and the government's trying to respond to it, but it's a difficult issue.
And the smart people find a way to address those challenges.
Right. And honestly, it's not an unsolvable problem. You think about the number of unmanned vehicles that we have from a military perspective in use today. Obviously, we have technical solutions for making these things viable. Part of our challenge in terms of what we do for the automotive space is really making it effective in a more mass market sort of way. That's obviously a very high level of technology that's applied to our use of drones and other things like that in a military environment. But the good thing is that technology evolves at such a rapid pace that we really can bring it down to a least common denominator, lowest common denominator type of a thing for application in vehicle, and I think we'll get to that same point.
Yep. It's interesting that Congress has directed the Federal Aviation Administration to expand the use of commercial drones because these small drones have tremendous commercial potential in terms of inspecting buildings, flying over landscapes. It can be potentially a huge multi-billion-dollar industry down the road. But some of the issues that being raised there, hacking, privacy, are the same issues that we're dealing with connected vehicles.
Yep. Yeah, Jake had a term on a slide. It's excellent, and we'll get to that question. The Internet of Things, right? We'll come back to that, but let's answer this question. Ask this question first.
Here we are at SEMA, and there's a mess of old white guys, and there's a mess of hot rods in there. It's one thing to have a connected vehicle that your garage mechanic can look at, get his arms around, get his head around, and then there is the cyber guy, the geek that knows how to work on his car. And you're talking about info systems, data systems, GPS, nav units, all that sort of stuff is all fun and frills. But when you walk around SEMA and you can't find a off-the-shelf drive-by-wire system for a hot rod, there's a huge disconnect there. Yep. All modern cars pretty much are now drive-by-wire. Would you not agree? Pretty much, OEM. So your OEM connected cars, your OEM internet downloadability through 3G, get your upload and get all your new stuff is all well and good, but that's all on the OEM side. On the SEMA side, where there's companies that have got to make a living bringing their technology into the modern cars or modern technology back into the retro cars, which is all the rage right now. You can't even find a drive-by-wire system because of the legal ramifications. That's not a hard system to do, but nobody wants to do it because of the legal ramifications and the liability of doing a drive-by-wire, just even drive-by-wire. That's just one little aspect.
So your question is why isn't that technology in the aftermarket?
My question is where do we bring that connectivity of the new world technology to a SEMA, to our local hot rod shop mechanic? Where do we get the backwards connectivity? And otherwise, this is going to turn into an OEM show with all the new OEM stuff. Look at what our Tesla will do. Look at what our Pioneer-equipped car will do. And you just become OEM.
Yep. That's a good point. It's the technology transfer between OE and aftermarket. And again, Neil talked about that in making a 32 Ford with the same technology on the link. What do you guys think? Jump in.
Well, I can't speak to mechanical. I mean, I'm a tech guy, as in, software, zeros and ones, APIs, that sort of thing. I'm not the wrench under the hood guy. That's kind of ironic because I went to school for engineering, but yet I'm still kind of the software guy. One of the cool things that Ford has is OpenXC. Have you ever heard of this program, OpenXC? It's now actually open. It's open sourced. So it doesn't address your issue about drive-by-wire, but it is an approach saying, hey, if you are aftermarket, here's a plug through OBD2, and you can do a bunch of cool stuff with it. And I encourage anyone to check out OpenXC. It's really cool stuff. And it doesn't address that issue about drive-by-wire, but it does address the general concern about, would this be an OEM show? And what I've seen at the Consumer Electronics Show is when I started going to CES, it was really a manufacturer's organization, and now you have apps, now you have wearable electronics, now you have smart connected software companies that don't even make hardware. So as an outsider looking in, I would say that if OEMs continue to allow the aftermarket to integrate with their systems, and in a software we have a product like OpenXC to do that, then there it is. And I think last year I made a comment, I think it was on this panel, I don't know if it was the CS one, that if you haven't taken a look into software or working with third-party vendor software, you're missing out on a significant part of what I believe the future of aftermarket is going to be in 20 years.
Yep, OpenXC at Ford, and GM obviously doing some of the same thing. They had their sandbox, they had their AT&T hackathon that they did at CES last year.
I'll
jump in.
There's 70 people in this audience today. There's 150,000 people here. The opportunity to learn is here. It's the question is, how do we get other people to care enough to come into these sessions? And John's been putting on the connected vehicle, the technology showcase for 7-8 years now, and the message is getting out there, but it's not getting out there broad enough. So we need to figure out how to work within the experts on this panel with John to reach out to the industry within SEMA, within these halls, to be able to provide more education, provide those opportunities, so that we're not constantly talking to ourselves, that we're talking and expanding and growing. I agree, it's an issue that has to be addressed, but it's an issue that we can't address sitting up here on stage. We need to figure out how to bring others, get others engaged with us in the program and process. But you're right, it's an issue that has to be looked into more deeply.
Well, and I think companies like Pioneer, they don't wait for it, they just do it.
Yeah, my response would be, I obviously can't speak to drivetrain or other systems like that, but, our product, the 29 products that I kind of listed on our slide, they'll bring some form of connectivity, and I've been in this industry longer than I like to share, but, I started my career installing car stereos in cars. And when I started I think our first CD player we put in a car was 1988, and my job was to take a hacksaw and to cut a rectangular hole in the dash of every car that came through the door. And it has now evolved into integrating into the electrical bus system in a vehicle to talk to that bus system and get things like speed data for navigational use or speed control use or whatever that is. There are integration companies, some of which are here, some of which are at CES, there are a lot of smart people, as I said, who have said, I want to be able to plug a module in and connect my Pioneer car stereo and see the tachometer data.
Right.
Or roll down the windows or do things like that. There's a company in this hall, I think, called Palmer Performance. They're on the app radio. They do things like that. There's a company called iData Link that has Maestro modules that talk to Ford vehicles and other vehicles and will read some of that data that's on an OEM display, but now it will connect to a Pioneer radio or some of our peers and display that data on the aftermarket radio. So there is a spirit of trying to do that. Again, I can't speak to drivetrain and other systems in the vehicle, but for systems that are entertainment-based, information-based, other things, there is still a thriving aftermarket that wants to be able to put a product in that aftermarket vehicle, because the consumer, as I said, every 6 months when a new smartphone comes out, the consumer wants to change. Yep. There are billions of apps on smartphones and tablets because there's someone out there that says Pandora is not good enough. There's someone out there that says the navigation that came in my car isn't good enough.
Yep.
Waze, recently acquired by Google, they're people who said, navigation isn't good enough. I want to know what's happening in the car in front of me.
Yep.
So vehicle to vehicle, which will someday be regulated, is happening today on multiple application platforms like Waze, where the smartphones are talking to one another in the car and giving the consumer data about what's going on around them while they drive. So it will come, and we're not alone. There are plenty of aftermarket companies out there that want to put this technology in all of these thousands of SEMA vehicles that are out there.
Yeah, and that's a great challenge. Absolutely. Yeah. Ron.
I don't want this to sound like a commercial, but it'll turn into one. We also own PowerTech, which is performance tuning, Superchips and Edge brands. And so we're dealing with the encryption issues and the accessing and
the cybersecurity.
And hacking on a constant basis is getting harder and harder and harder. But to that end, and to the prior gentleman's comment, that's late model OEM-based access that we're doing through those products. We're doing access, tuning, and extraction of data that people need to know. But with Brainwave, we now take and tie the two together and back it into the hot rod industry and back it into the true old hardcore performance. And Brainwave gives you access backwards and forwards, and becomes additive as you go into other things. So, encryption's an issue, but it always will be, and we'll just always keep dealing with it. That's what allows us to move forward. And you just have to have the security at times to build into it.
Yep.
But hopefully Brainwave will make that connection and this commercial's over.
No, and kudos to you, because it's stepping up literally and letting people know that you are addressing some of those issues and you have a product, a platform to start integrating some of these things at the aftermarket level, which is great. It's not just the OEM level, not waiting for something to come out of some architecture or some platform.
So one other thing, if I could add, I think, from our standpoint, the goal is really to get this platform idea, modular enough such that we can build, silver box aftermarket type systems. And that was sort of part of the whole idea in terms of what I was trying to convey earlier, is that this really isn't a form that, as you identify, there is an opportunity for aftermarket companies to go out there and actually take and innovate and build out this idea for the future, and then make it compatible for just about anything that's in the marketplace today. So we really, really want to try and continue to build out that modular idea longer term.
Cool.
And we see the same sort of thing in Detroit. Obviously the aftermarket has a very, very big influence on what the OEMs are thinking long term. They actually take direction from what they're seeing, from sort of that bubble up type of philosophy, just the same way that they're finally coming to terms with the idea of how important it is to be present at CES the same way. I don't know, I think you've probably seen, but CES has become more of an automotive show over the last few years than it has been a consumer electronics show.
And Ford, obviously a lot of smart people at Ford, and they saw what Jake was doing and said, we need that. Kudos to the aftermarket.
John, one comment, and this kind of goes, I think, a little bit to aftermarket, is the cost and the investments. And I think someone else mentioned about, I think you mentioned legal exposure and the cost of dealing with that. We spent millions of dollars in venture funds to get where we got over basically a 5.5-year time span. And you have to have critical mass, millions. So I remember a conversation with one of my app partners, I won't say which one it was, saying, Jake, it's really cool that you have access to 4 million potential vehicles, but I don't get out of bed in the morning unless there's 25 million users. So what are you going to do for me? Because in order for me to have an advertising base, I need that many people. So when you think about scale, it's a challenge because you have to develop this set of code and this amount of upfront work, and whether it's legal, whether it's just engineering, business development, everything goes into product development to get there. And that's something that really hasn't been discussed today, but I'm hoping that through standardization of these products, and I think everyone up here is pushing standards, it'll make it that much more affordable for a smaller company to get in the game.
Well, Paul will get that message out to SAE for sure. Right? Uh-oh, we got him riled now.
Isn't there some sort of committees that deal with this sort of thing? My area is air conditioning, which is we have enough trouble there. But don't you have committees that deal with set up these standards? I know there have been most of the things like MOST and things like that were all developed as part of standards. Don't you have that in this industry? I don't know. I'm being perfectly honest.
It's a good question, Paul.
It's not my my area. I assume there's got to be some. So we have U.S. Car that does things like this. Don't you?
For the vehicle-to-vehicle side and the vehicle-to-road side, there's 3 big standards. There's the 2 organizations, SAE. There's a couple of SAE standard bodies that are standards that are set up around that. There's a couple of IEEE standards looking at the radio and the security side. And I think Jake hit on one. The Geneva Alliance is setting standards for the software in the vehicle. So there are some of those standards that are out there that are being worked on, and there are bodies that are setting those standards and being adopted as well. So there is that is happening.
Okay, cool. So this is the last question, and kind of the lightning round. This is for all the points, as Jake knows. If you win, you get invited back. Others that don't. No, just kidding. Just kidding. So in terms of the Internet things, connectivity drivers, infotainment systems, integrating the home with the car, what advice would you give to the SEMA members? The next thing that you think they should be either working on or integrating with some of the ideas and things that you guys have talked about. Let's start with you, Greg.
Great.
Tough question.
Yeah.
That's why there's points.
That's why there's points. Really, it's the integration of all the different components. It's paying attention to what's happening, whether it's in the consumer space with the telematics side, with the applications and the hardware and such, but also looking at the safety side of the NHTSA regulations.
Yep.
How do those two merge? How do those two marry? And how do you focus on, or how do you build around that safety side of things? Because with NHTSA coming with potential regulation, mandating that in new vehicles, there's a huge retrofit opportunity out there. And how do we focus on that? How do we build to that?
So it's integration. And Ted's a previous winner of coming back, right? So.
You know, I've said it a bunch of different ways today. It's supply and demand. So, you know, the next thing is going to be what the consumer wants. You know, it's so unique here at SEMA Show because, as I said, it's an entire show filled with people who said, I want that in my car. In 1920-something, there was somebody who said, I want music in my car, and they built a radio for it. The next thing is going to be whatever you want, or you want, or you want in the back. You know, and as we all kind of said, today is really unique because there are people out there, whether it's 3D printers, or it's people who write code for applications, or it's people who make connected devices that'll talk to the internet and talk to your car. There are more smart people out there that will help you get what you want made than ever before.
And SEMA is a platform to expose those ideas to opportunities and partners to come together. Thanks, Ted. Jim?
Yeah, I would say it's a willingness to accept common platforms. I mean, to Jake's comment, his buddy doesn't get out of bed unless he's got 25 million users.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of manufacturers are proprietary, and you know they want to do it their own way.
Secret stuff.
Exactly, and you're never going to be successful that way. I mean, you got to be willing to take the risk of dealing with competition through innovation in high quality, but accept an open architecture. I mean, and that's where you're going to get your mass.
Yep. Excellent. David?
I think you know, the message would be stay passionate. Stay passionate about developing new ideas and really innovating. The idea being a lot of what we talked about here today is that we're trying to give you a base level system, a base level platform that's common, that can be a starting point for all these really creative, innovative, wonderful things that people are dreaming up. And as you've seen, not only can these be, you know, technological advances, but they can be aesthetically beautiful. I mean, the wonderful thing about SEMA looking around here today is I'm amazed at just how many incredible, beautiful physical surfaces there are on all of the machines that are being built. The wonderful thing is now we can digitally recreate a lot of that and harmonize that experience inside the vehicle. So I say take the same passion that's been exposed to those physical, mechanical things and apply it to sort of the digital space.
Make sure you get to North Hall. I mean, and obviously, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in all the halls, but North Hall really kind of brings together South Hall with a lot of the wheels and tires, together with electronics, things we have in the North Hall. Awesome. You see it manifested at the vehicle level.
So everybody here has a business, or there's a reason why you're at the show. You specialize in something. You know what that something is. It's the something that you do better than anybody else in this room, everybody else in this area does. That's your thing. Everything except for that thing, work with the community to build on that, everything else. Set up a Google alert for different standards that you want to follow. Set up a Google alert for different trending topics that you're looking for. But focus on your thing. Don't share that. That's your thing. But everything else, work together.
So, Paul, what do you think? What advice?
Get good legal advice.
Get a lawyer.
Do that risk analysis you mentioned, right?
No, yeah, seriously. I mean, depending on what your application is, particularly if it's safety related, then just get at least a preliminary sense of the landscape before you're diving in, because you can invest a lot of time and effort and find that there are obstacles which you're not going to be able to change, and working around them belatedly might be very expensive.
Yep.
So
When I was with the NSA, they called that situational awareness. You got to know what's happening around you, up, down, left, right, everything. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists: Paul Lorenza, Jake Siegel, David Anderson, Jim Trainer, Ted Cardenas, and Greg Krieger. Thank you, guys.